This is the worst movie I have ever seen. In my mind, it's not as good as Your Name or Weathering with You.
That's a very high bar already, though.
What a swing there.
Good animation, good music, stupid plot, and stupid character, not characters.
Oh, they're just bad. Okay.
They put that character, not characters. Okay.
This is a film specifically made to degenerate your brain and IQ. The whole movie happens because she thinks the guy is hot and decides to stalk him. Absurd.
I mean,
That happens a lot in real life. It happens to me all the time, I promise.
Have they ever watched
Just check my blog.
rom-com?
That was a 1-star review from IMDb. Hello there, and welcome to Spoilers Intended, a podcast about series and films. I'm your host, Andrew, joined as always by Ryan.
I've got the key to your heart, and I'm going to unlock it.
And
That's
Steven.
not how the plot works. I would just like to back up our 1-star reviewer in my hello plug by saying that he's totally right. There are so many movies that start with people stalking each other. It's ridiculous. It's actually, they're like, that person's hot. I should follow them and see where they go.
And this is Steven.
Just tell you, that's how so many movies start. But yes, that's me.
It really is.
This week we are discussing Suzume, the third feature-length film by Makoto Shinkai out of Japan. This is an anime film, and we are talking about
One of them Japanese animation movies.
That's
sure
your
are.
mother warned you about.
However, before we get into the nitty-gritty of his third film and what we think about it, I want to talk about some other road movies.
Road movies, because in this movie they kind of
They kind of travel and traverse
yeah.
across Japan.
Yeah, they cover a lot of distance, actually.
They cover quite a bit of distance, and they're going to different cities, and they're meeting new people, and just kind of the trials and tribulations that go along with those, along with the main storyline.
Yeah.
And so I kind of wanted to talk about some other road films that you could also be a TV show too if you really wanted to. But yeah, I'm kind of
Expanding
curious.
the definition. I'm not sure how I feel about that.
I'm fine with it.
Road media. There we go.
Road media.
Road
Okay.
media. Do you want me to lead off?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. 1994, Dumb and Dumber.
That's a good road movie.
I knew that was going to happen.
I love this movie, first off. It came out at a very pivotal time in my life when I needed a very dumb comedy, and I got it. For those that don't know somehow.
I've actually never seen Dumb and Dumber.
What?
Yeah.
Stop the podcast.
I've only seen the first half. I walked away from it.
Stop the podcast. I've seen this movie like 180 times.
Nope. I say first half. I've probably only seen the first third.
What is wrong with you?
I just
They kill a parakeet and sell it to a blind boy. I was done.
Yeah, but nobody likes parakeets. Like parakeets
Wow,
are
that's
like
rude.
They're rats with wings. Like get over it.
But I had a parakeet for most of my childhood.
I'm so sorry for you. Get a real pet, like a dog or a cat, Steven. Come on.
Your tongue
we had
there.
those too.
I'd even accept a pet turtle or goldfish, but a parakeet? Oh.
Oh, you're in trouble, buddy.
I'm just kidding. I never had birds because they smell weird. But anyways, to each his own.
And then they fly
They
at you
poop
with
on the
weird
newspaper.
smells.
They're so noisy. Anyways, plot summary. After a woman leaves a briefcase at the airport terminal, a dumb limo driver and his dumber friend set out on a hilarious cross-country road trip to Aspen to return it. And yeah, I've probably unironically seen this movie hundreds of times.
Wolf.
It's fantastic. It's one of my favorite comedies of the 90s.
One of my fellow podcasters right now. I'm not gonna lie.
It's a really good comedy. I'll fight and die on that hill.
So,
With you guys not seeing it, I was going to everybody talk about their favorite scenes, but now that's got deflated. And now I don't want to tell you some of my favorite scenes because you haven't seen it yet. I don't want to ruin it for
But
you.
the thing is, like, I'm on the internet. I've seen every scene that happens in the movie in some piece or other.
I mean, the parakeet scene's hilarious. Like,
No, it's not. Shut
pretty
up.
bird.
No, it's not. Shut up. Stop.
oh man,
It's so terrible.
The whole thing with this movie is this is the Farrelly brothers, and this is like one of their first big movie.
Mm-hmm.
They did, Something About Mary. They did Me, Myself, and Irene. They did like a bunch of like
I haven't seen either.
really
of those.
raunchy comedies.
Yeah.
They have a very specific style. And man, in 1994, it was Ryan's style of humor. And in 2023, it's still Ryan's style of humor.
We've made real progress here.
But yeah, in this movie, basically, this lady loses this briefcase.
Yeah.
And
loses.
yeah, it's part of a.
I don't want to give away the plot.
whole thing, yeah.
It's part of a whole thing. It's got Samsonite, and he's like, Samsonite? we got to find this Samsonite lady and get her briefcase back. She must be pretty rich. She got it written on her briefcase, her last name. And then they just go across the country and they just constantly, they meet so many people along the way. And every time they stop, there's just some stupid hijinks. Yeah. And then,
I mean, from what I've heard outside of Ace Ventura, this is kind of like peak Jim Carrey.
I would definitely concur.
I feel like almost every moment of Jim Carrey is peak
Jim Carrey.
The Mask is peak Jim Carrey.
Oh, God,
but this
really
was like that same heat from like Ace Ventura and like Dumb and Dumber. He had like 3 or 4 movies in the mid 90s that were just like
bangers.
Bang. Yeah. And this is for me some of his best comedic time because that's it. The Jeff Daniels and Jim Carrey comedic timing where they like talk back and forth. The setup and the payoff between the two of them throughout the entire movie is just killer.
Nice.
All right, Steven.
No. I want to hear Andrew.
What do you think? Oh,
really?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, man.
I've got 2 options queued up. I'm debating between them. I want Andrew go first. He can't take both choices. So
okay. So, wow, I wasn't expecting to go second. So here we are.
Go ahead.
So 2000.
Do you need like a running start?
No, 2004.
Okay.
The TV series Samurai Champloo.
Oh,
from Shinichiro Watanabe.
Yeah, that is a good
anime, also in Japan. I see why you want to go last. You want to be as on brand as possible.
Exactly.
Tough. You don't get to be on brand.
Yeah.
Deal with it.
Well, so my alternate was the Muppet movie.
Okay, so I was safe. That's a good road trip movie.
Yes.
So in reviewing this, we have discovered that there are so many good road trip movies.
There are a lot of good road trip movies.
There are thousands of really good road trip movies.
Yeah. Okay, but I am going to talk about Samurai Champloo. So here's the synopsis. The series is set in the fictionalized version of Edo period Japan, blending traditional elements with anachronistic cultural references, including hip-hop, because it came out in 2004. He wanted to do something different than jazz.
Yeah.
The series follows the exploits of tea waitress Fu, vagrant outlaw Mugen, and Ronin Jin. Fu saves Mugen and Jin from execution, and then forces the pair to aid her in a quest to find a samurai who smells of sunflowers. And then basically hilarity ensues and hijinks, and they kind of take this trip across Japan, going through Edo period, and just finding bits and pieces of. Kind of stuff that they lost themselves, growing up and everything. The
music in this is fantastic.
It is. Basically, it's structured to a road movie. The series focuses on the tolerance and acceptance of minorities contrasted against its setting, and with a central theme of basically being the portrayal and acceptance of death, which is very on brand for Suzume. Normally, this would be the segue to talk about.
Take your synergy
film.
and stuff it. Okay,
right?
That's what Steven said.
I'm here to absolutely train wreck whatever flow you thought you had.
I know. I had it all planned out.
Makes for great listening. Thanks, listeners.
But so this show is actually quite fantastic. I think this is probably one of my. I think this is. I like this better than Cowboy Bebop.
Ooh, I'm not going to ever go that far, but I like it nearly as much as Cowboy Bebop.
It depends on your mood, right? Because this is not as I don't want to say down, but it's not as much of a downer as Bebop can be, because Bebop is very much so kind of like a depression mood at times.
It is.
And this is really never that. It's always more of a fun, wacky.
Yeah, and you do get some really fun, like, kind of juxtaposition with definitely like the hip hop styling of the show. And then you have the Edo period samurai Ronin kind of stuff, and you have some really great action sequences.
Oh yeah,
and
I think just the dynamic between the main 3 leads is
it's
really
fantastic.
good.
It's really good, really strong.
Yeah, because you have Mugen, who's kind of the wild card. Then you have Jin, who is the reserved, very talented samurai, and then Fu, who's kind of an idiot.
Yeah,
and you have this good dichotomy between all of them that are. Every episode, you get to kind of see the comedy of errors that end up with them either winning or losing or whatever in some hilarious way, and it's really good.
Yeah.
All right, Steven.
Okay, I'm still debating between weird and wacky or heartfelt.
Make a choice and do it fast.
Muppet movie? I don't know.
No, that wasn't on my list, actually.
That's actually very surprising.
I
forgot about it?
No, I thought
For someone that looks so much like Gonzo, I can't believe you didn't pick it up.
The problem is, I hit on this one, and I immediately fixated on it because it was weird, and there's a possibility that y'all are both like, I haven't seen that. And I was
Donnie
like,
Darko?
I like the whole... No, you...
He drives down the road.
That's not even a road trip.
Like to his school and home. What are
you talking about?
It's a road trip through time.
We're gonna wing this. We're gonna go with the wacky choice here, and I'm gonna go with Paul.
Paul?
2011's Paul.
The Alien movie?
Yes,
Oh,
the Alien.
I've
yeah,
seen
yeah,
like
yeah.
probably half that, I think.
So the summary I'm going to give you is the briefest one ever because every other summary gives everything away.
Yeah.
2 English comic book geeks traveling across the U.S. encounter an alien outside Area 51. Hijinks ensue as they travel across the U.S.
Yeah.
Doesn't Seth Rogen play the alien?
Seth Rogen
does.
voices the alien, and you have Simon Pegg and Nick Frost are your 2 leads, which the 2 of them are just phenomenal.
They're always great
comedy.
together.
Yeah, basically
Yeah.
any if you have any liking of British comedy and you somehow haven't seen their films, I can't help you, but also like what's going on here? We need to have a conversation.
You could
because-
tell him where to go to see him. Or,
Yeah, well, you got
There's
like
ways to help, is what
Yeah,
I'm
you got
saying.
like Hot Fuzz, what Shaun of the Dead, like so many good choices out there. but
Start with Spaced. Watch Spaced. More
Space
people
is-
need to watch
There we go.
Spaced.
Space is a good call. So yeah, this is just it's just so out there, and also 2011 we have a lot of Marvel has become big, but it hasn't really blown up in the way that it had. So this is 2 British dudes who go to America on a road trip to go to Comic-Con, and then because they're in America, they want to check out the site, so they go to Roswell and all this. They want to see the UFOs, and then they just happen to pick up an alien.
An alien.
And again, lots of hijinks ensue, but it's kind of a call out and like I don't want to say an ode to nerddom, but it is at a time when it wasn't quite as mainstream as it is now.
Yeah.
It is very nice to see it handled as well as it is, and the 2 main characters have just this phenomenal arc and relationship between them as the stresses, and they're being pursued by like the FBI and all this other is going on, and they also just straight up they have an alien who has really bizarre powers, and like he's lived on Earth for like 60 years, like he's been there basically since
Since the
Roswell
crash, yeah.
and so he has all this random like pop culture knowledge or whatever else. But it's really fun. It's kind of out there, and I feel like again it's one of those movies that a lot of people haven't seen.
Yeah.
So I figured I'd go with that one.
Yeah.
And I chose that, and you're going to hate me for this. I chose that over Onward.
Oh my gosh.
Right?
How dare
I knew
you?
I'd make Andrew mad about that. Which also, if you haven't seen Onward and you want some heartfelt, you want to cry, because I know Andrew cried at this one. Onward from Pixar.
I did.
It got destroyed by the pandemic, sadly, but it's a phenomenal film as well.
It is. I think that's the last Pixar feeling Pixar film.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
What's come out after
Well,
that?
you're gonna slam
yeah.
on Turning Red?
I mean, no. Turning Red is a great film. I don't think it's a Pixar feeling film.
Okay, I can accept that answer.
So we had Turning Red, Soul, Luca, Lightyear. We're going to have the Elemental one.
Whatever that
I've
was.
only seen
whatever.
Lightyear out of that list. Wow. I need
Yeah.
to catch up.
Yeah,
So Luca's
Luca's good.
fun. It's very close to feeling like a Pixar film.
Okay.
Soul is pretty good. Like there's some really heartfelt moments
See,
in it.
I feel like Soul is very heartfelt. I just don't know if it's what I would have considered a Pixar.
Yeah,
And
like
that's,
because Onward had a lot of
splitting
fun with
hairs,
it,
yeah.
and you also get like the really hard hitting,
hits
just
hard,
emotional.
yeah.
Okay, so we're going to move on to talking about Suzume, and here is a synopsis for you for those who are uninitiated so far. A modern action-adventure road story where a 17-year-old girl named Suzume helps a mysterious young man close doors from the ever after that are releasing disasters all across Japan. So pretty, kind of general action-adventure, call to adventure, right?
Yeah.
Production company was done by Comics Wave Films and Story Inc., written, edited, screenplay, storyboarded, and directed by Makoto Shinkai. He has a lot of hands.
Man is working hard.
Yeah, he's working real hard. Music was done by Radwimps and Kazuma Jinochi.
So Radwimps, is that a band,
That is a band.
person? And okay.
Yeah, it's a band.
Yeah.
Kind of going into just how successful this film has been.
Yeah. Because now this released in Japan when?
In November
2022?
Yeah, 2022.
Yes.
And so far, in the box office, it has $256 million global.
Okay.
Okay. $5 million domestic U.S., but it just came out basically this past weekend because we're recording it on the Monday after the weekend it came out. And just as a general idea of like how much money that is for an anime film, it is currently the 4th highest grossing film from Japan, period.
Okay. What are the other top three?
So you have the Demon Slayer movie with Mugen Train at $507 million. That came out like 2 years ago, and it's just Demon Slayer. You can't really beat it. Then you had Spirited Away, which came out in 2001. 395 million is pretty respectable. Then you had Your Name, which is also a Makoto Shinkai film, 382 million, and then you pretty much drop a whole 100 million, and then you go down to Suzume, which is 289 million.
But still
currently
in the box office.
Yes.
So
still making money out there.
And just as a Weathering with You, which was another Makoto Shinkai film that came out in 2020, 193 million. So it's pretty much like a 100 million gap, 100 million gap, 100 million gap for each of his films.
Well, in 2020, that's pandemic.
That's pandemic. So like, that one just kind of got hammered, I think.
I was going to say, you got limited theaters and stuff like that. Yeah.
But yeah. So we have all of those. And I mean, all three of his films are in the top 10 of highest grossing films of Japan, period.
Yeah.
I think the closest analog that you could really bring here is he is Japan's James Cameron.
Okay. Yeah.
It's so true.
He has a lot of control over his work, and he has the vision and the ability to make it happen and to be successful. And he's just had 3 back-to-back-to-back films that have just been absolute bangers, I think, in my opinion, and for different reasons.
Well, and I would say, like, probably from a worldwide box office standpoint, all of his films are extremely pretty.
Yes.
And so that makes a very easy trailer to show someone who may not be like a huge anime fan or like, in a different market in Germany, wherever, and you see this gorgeous animation, you might get someone there just based off that alone.
So what you're saying is, again, it goes back to the James Cameron metaphor.
Yeah, same idea of like,
you may not necessarily understand the story, but darn it, if these blue people aren't pretty.
Yeah.
Right.
So this is basically the highest selling Japanese anime in China of all time.
In China. Okay.
In China.
And South Korea, right?
In South Korea, and has sold more tickets in South Korea than any other Japanese film.
Okay.
So what, was there like a 3D that made more money or something?
I'm not
some
sure.
Weird technicality in there.
There's some, I'm sure there's some weird stuff. But
some fiddling.
But yeah, so this was a pretty successful film so far. It's just coming out in the U.S. now. Crunchyroll and Sony have exclusive streaming rights, and there hasn't been an announced date of when it will be available to stream yet. But I would imagine once the theatrical run ends, they're probably going to put it online pretty quickly.
Crunchyroll is probably going to be hot to trot to get that on their site.
Yeah, so whenever it does come up to streaming, it will be available on Crunchyroll. Yeah. And if you don't catch this or catch this film in theaters, I highly recommend catching it on streaming as quickly as possible. It's honestly pretty fantastic.
I'll definitely watch it as soon as it hits Crunchyroll, which, side note, totally unrelated tangent. I gave my brother and his kid my Crunchyroll login because I was like, yeah, y'all can watch some stuff. And I got on there today. They have watched the entirety of the original Dragon Ball, all of Dragon Ball Z.
Nice.
Like 5 other animes, and it's been like 2 weeks. I'm like, what is happening in your household?
If they finished all of Dragon Ball and all of Dragon Ball Z in its entirety of uncut, that's close to 400 and something odd episodes.
In 2 weeks. I think they just left it on. I don't know what's happening.
Crazy.
I'm about to have to call him and be like, we're getting our money's worth.
Crunchyroll is going to call them and be like, we know that it says unlimited.
Yeah, we're going to get that call. Anyway, sorry.
Okay, yeah, so let's talk about Suzume. I want to hear what you guys thought about this, because I know what I thought, and I loved it.
I hope you know what you thought. I would be concerned if you didn't.
Andrew, let me tell you what you thought about this movie. I liked it a lot. I don't know if I'd go as far as say I loved it. I think for me, I think I still like Your Name better, but I like this better than Weathering with You. If you're putting it like in the 3, like right, that's where
there's going to be direct comparisons.
Absolutely,
all over the place. Yeah,
but looking at the 3 of his films that I've seen, I would say like Your Name is still number 1 for me, and then this one is second, and then Weathering with You. I thought the characters were a lot of fun in this. I liked the story, even though it doesn't really necessarily break any ground of like anything like I've never seen a story like this.
I mean, I don't know. It
remixes a lot of stuff.
It has its quirks.
It does, but it's like it's essentially star-crossed lovers, and they go on an adventure together, and like I did like a lot of aspects. I'm trying to dance around spoilers here.
Yeah, of course.
So generally, I'll just digress. I liked the story pretty good, but I think for me the animation really sold it. I thought the visuals were fantastic. There aren't many Japanese anime movies or series where they blend 3D and 2D animation, and I like it. I'm usually pro 2D all the way.
Yeah.
Get your 3D out of my, 2D movie type stuff.
Old man yells at cloud.
Yeah, like that's just how I'm old. I like my 2D animation to be 2D. Back in my day, we drew it with the hands. Anyways.
I want my hand animation to be sweatshops. Get back to work.
But this movie, to me, implements the 3D perfectly. Like at no point did I'll say it. This is called my opinion, not yours. I never had an issue with the 3D in this movie where like there's a bunch of examples of modern anime where the 3D hits and you're like, oh, y'all couldn't just animate that?
Yeah.
You had to make that car 3D? Come on, guys. This movie, I never had that feeling a single time. Every scene where they implemented 3D, I was like, okay, I like this. We're doing it tastefully. We're not doing it like over too much. Overall, I liked it a lot. I had a lot of fun. I do feel that like if you look at the overall story beats, just like the basic plot, it still kind of hews closely to his other first two movies in terms of like
100%,
the cadence and like the the places. So I would be excited for him to really go somewhere different in his like basic story structure. Because it does feel like the bones of what happens in each movie is very similar. It's just the path along the way gets kind of remixed and the magical or supernatural element is kind of remixed,
At the end of the day, all three of them are star-crossed lovers. There's only like so far. Once you've set that as this is the premise, you can only go so far.
Right, yeah.
And now they're in a war and she's flying a fighter jet. Like what? Top Gun Maverick? Tom Cruise, is that you?
Steven, what do you think?
All right, Ryan's opinion has ended. Steven's opinion begins.
Steven's opinion begins.
So on the subject of CGI versus 2D versus 3D, now I will say for the most part they mix the two pretty well, and character animations were phenomenal. There are a lot of really cool effects that were done. There's one point, without going into spoilers, there's definitely one point in the movie where I kind of leaned back and it like how different and how much the 3D animation stood out was so jarring that it was like disgusting. It was like I watched this screen and we went from beautiful to it's like mid 1990s and reboots on TV. It's like, what just happened?
Don't even know what scene you could be talking about.
We'll get into it in spoilers. Don't you worry. But
because reboot is a pretty extreme example, Steven.
No, it's like reboot or first Toy Story levels of like you could put your finger on that screen and squeak it across the plastic.
Andrew, is there any way over there for me to disagree harder, or do I keep it over here?
But besides that, like that moment in particular, the animation's phenomenal. I think compared to Your Name and Weathering with You, ultimately it suffers a little bit because the subject material isn't as beautiful. Like they can't really do quite as much with it. Yeah. Like when you're playing with rain and sunshine and Weathering with You, it's just a slam dunk. We're gonna make some beautiful scenes, right? Yeah. What if the clouds break and rays the sunshine? Oh gosh, of course it looks beautiful. Like, it's illuminating a trash heap in the middle of nowhere. It still looks great. Right. Yeah. So it hurts itself a little bit there. I think, to your point about the bones and the plot maybe not being as inventive, I do think that they, with this film, because of the three story-wise, this is my favorite, I think. I need to rewatch Your Name because that's the one I haven't seen the longest. But I think that they stretch some of that fabric enough with some of especially the comedy that works, because this movie is heavy. There are a lot of super heartfelt, emotional things going on within it. Yeah. And they did a really good job of like loading you down with emotion and tension and then breaking that with just that little bit of extra comedy bit. The little drop and it hits the water and the ripples go out and you can breathe for a moment because that was pretty funny. Like I didn't expect that. And then boom, boom, he hammers back down on you, right? Yeah. I will say I think the music was fantastic. I don't think it's quite. I still think ultimately when you go to like Miyazaki, he's still probably the best at combining music and a scene. Yeah. I think across the board. Again, he has a bigger body of work than
he has a large body of work, and I mean, like, and this is absolutely no knock against Radwimps because I love all their music. Yeah. But they are not Joe Hisaishi.
Right. Yeah. Like you're just not going to be Hisaishi. It's not going to happen. Yeah. So, but coming in second here is not like failing, right? This is still a very high bar.
Yeah.
So
Well, I would say too, not to while we're talking about Miyazaki, to bring that inevitable comparison up here,
Yep.
is like for me, with Miyazaki, each movie is so wildly different that even though some of them have kind of a similar structure, they feel like a Miyazaki movie. He talks about different subjects. He goes in different places. Things happen. Shinkai's films feel very like of the same kind of sort to me.
Again, Miyazaki has a much longer
100%,
time period
yeah.
and a much wider, but like you can go all the way back into the late 70s.
But even if you look at his first three movies, I feel from like Nausicaa on.
I mean, I could pick 4 films of his that are basically all the exact same message.
War is bad.
Yeah.
Or war is bad, or environmentalism.
environmentalism,
I mean,
yeah.
like I can. Like
Anyways,
this one,
hold on. This is not a Miyazaki podcast.
We will have that.
We'll get there.
soon.
We'll get there. I'm just saying that for me, I feel like I at least story-wise and visuals and music-wise, Miyazaki is a different animal. And the comparisons are obviously there because it's a huge animated film and it's making tons of money. But like for me, they are different directors entirely. Because,
very much.
Yeah, Miyazaki movies to me, I still feel like I'm more of a fan of that than Shinkai's films. But I really did like this movie. Yeah. Like I don't want to like sell it too short. I just want to.
He hated it.
Well, for people listening, if you're familiar with
torches.
Miyazaki movies and you're like, oh, I got to check this out. It's like this isn't like a Miyazaki movie.
No,
this is like its own thing.
This is not My Neighbor Totoro.
Right.
No,
yeah.
That's not happening. You're not getting that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, overall, I think it was really, really well done. I think again, the animation was very high. The music was very good. The character interactions felt very good. I think that he did a really good job, which he does for all of them, really. Spent a lot of time with his main characters and built up what feels like a real connection between them.
And a real relationship.
It's really easy in a film to just be like, well, these people are going to fall in love. Why? Because they're the main characters. Duh. You're supposed to root for them. And like, you don't get that here.
Yeah, you actually get some genuine like moments with them.
Right. Yeah. So I think that in that sense, he does a really good job there. There's a lot of good with just a couple of nitpicks that we'll go deeper into once we get into spoilers. But Andrew?
Yeah. So I absolutely love this film for a couple different reasons, but a lot of them I can't really talk about before the spoiler wall.
Right.
Mostly just because there's a lot more historical comparisons with this film than his other two, because this actually does take place not in the universe of Your Name and Weathering with You. This is basically in more real world Japan.
Yeah.
And because of that, you're going to have a little bit more of an emotional and pretty I'll say emotionally draining story, just because there's a lot of catharsis that happens like later towards the end of the film. But oddly enough, it's probably his closest to a Ghibli film, because you do get some more fantastical, I'll say, creatures is the best way to describe it. Yeah. And just some of the conflicts that happen throughout the film are very indicative of like a Ghibli film. And it would help that, Shinkai actually said that one of his main inspirations for this film was Kiki's Delivery Service from 1989. Yeah. And along with Super Frog Saves Tokyo, and then
the classic Super Frog Saves Tokyo,
and the novel Kafka on the Shore. So like those are basically the 3 big inspirations that he had for this film. Yeah. But he also really wanted to hit home that he wanted it to be different than the other 2, because it was. He wanted to be a little bit more of a closure for some big events that happened in Japan a while ago. Right.
I will say that is one other, again, we're talking about moving away from the framework, is the first 2 films are their own universe. Yes. It's still, modern day real world, but it's its own, this is modern day actual, Earth 1 universe, right? So that also, again, is a breakaway from what we see in the past.
And the trailer with
wrong. Okay, that's what I'm really saying.
Okay, cool. the trailer with the water also made me feel like this was connected to the other 2.
As much as well.
But then I'm going into the movie assuming that, and then she's riding around, and I'm like, okay, maybe this is connected, and then you get to a point without spoiling anything that you figure out it's not connected.
A little subversion of expectations.
So the one thing that I really liked about this film was the comedy and the comedic timing for a lot of like their jokes and just their situations that they get in was phenomenal.
Yeah.
And I think it was much better than it was in Your Name, definitely in Weathering with You. And I love Your Name. It's like probably one of my favorite. I've seen it so many times. But this one, it felt like you could get a little bit more connection with the characters, where the star-crossed lovers with Mitsuha and Taki from Your Name, it's a little bit more where they're just kind of thrust into a situation to where like it just automatically they're going to eventually have feelings for each other based on the situation that they're in.
Right.
Where this doesn't feel like it was maybe that forced.
I mean, okay,
to a degree.
No. I'll back Andrew up on this one. Your Name is like there's not to spoil that plot or anything, but it's like there's a misconnection and they happen to connect because they dialed the wrong number, right?
Yes.
You're like, Suzume happens because our main character stops because she's like, oh, he's hot.
Yeah.
And then
Oh my!
it's entirely her agency. Well, she's right. He is hot. All right.
Yeah.
Basically every Japanese character, this guy is going to be hot, laid out like in 3 sections of a scene. Boom, boom, boom.
He's got the shoulder length hair,
Well, and then
kind
the
of
wind,
mysterious
he
looking.
turns
in
to
the
look,
wind.
and the wind hits it. It's like, oh, okay. Well, I know what we're supposed to get out of this guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, the comedy was really good. The character interactions were really good. It was really fun kind of going on a road trip across Japan. I like to go to Japan. We're going to, later this year.
Yeah.
That's kind of one of those. I mean, like, so seeing a lot of the
Not
places.
the podcast.
Just me.
Andrew, his wife, and other people who are more significant to him than us.
And he told us he was going to book our
trip.
tickets, but he didn't do it.
But yeah, the other big thing too is that, and this is kind of getting into close because we're about to say, would we rewatch this or would you recommend it? I would definitely be aware that whenever you go into this film, it is incredibly emotional if you have pets, and if you there's no animal death.
Yeah, there's not like the dog gets hit by the car.
Yeah,
or
there's
you gotta
nothing like
put
that.
a little yeller
But-
down. Like
but
none of
there-
that happens, but it's hard.
Yeah, there's a lot of moments in this film that if you do have pets or if you've ever lost a pet or anything like that, it will hit you. And, just be prepared going into that you just need to be emotionally ready for it.
Also, if you're like a carpenter and you care a lot about chairs and wood,
Shut up,
there's a lot going on here.
I
guys.
will say, again, without spoilers, there was a scene in the movie where I was like, oh my gosh, if this happens and Andrew didn't say something before we went into this film, I'm going to kill him because now I got to deal with Lauren because she's going to be crying all night.
Yeah, no, there's no major animal death or anything like that. It's not that kind of film. But there are definitely some very emotional moments if you are a pet owner or have lost pets in the past. Though just keep that in mind kind of going into it. It is definitely probably the most emotional out of the 3 films that he's done, I think.
I think it covers, again, partly by being set real world, it covers a bigger range.
It
right?
does.
Because typically, again, a romance, star-crossed lovers, there's only so the emotion's love,
And
right?
it's generally melodrama.
Yeah, you only get so much out of it. There's a lot more going on in this than that. And I, honestly, you were talking about the other 2. I can't recall much, and it may just be time, much of the same kind of comedy that we got out of this one in those films.
This one definitely had a lot more
I think this was
truly
much higher.
comedic moments.
Yeah.
See, I would mildly disagree a little bit. I thought there was a lot of comedy in this, but I watched Weathering with You 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I thought it had a little more comedy than this did.
Interesting.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
for me. But I think it was character driven in ways that
as opposed
this
to
was
more
situation.
situational.
situational. Yeah. So it's I say that I didn't write it out with a tally mark of every time I laughed at each one. I think it's more character driven comedy was present in Weathering with You. This is more situational.
Yeah, it's more situational.
So it's different types of comedy. But in my head, and again, I haven't seen or rewatched Your Name in a while. So it's I felt like the love story of Your Name was stronger.
Oh, 100%.
That's what I came away with.
But that's the whole point of the film is a love
It's a
story.
love story. Yeah, if
Yeah.
you didn't come away with a love
Right,
story out
yeah.
of that, then the film was a waste.
Comedy of Weathering with You, I felt was a little better than this, but maybe it's just my style of comedy specifically instead of the situational versus the character driven. But I thought the action and the depth of the emotions they got to in this movie was better.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, it covers more than just the love story.
Yeah.
or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. So what? Okay. Would you guys recommend it and rewatch it?
I would absolutely recommend this movie, even if you haven't seen, any of the. You don't have to.
You don't
watch
have to
The
see
best
the
part
other
is you
ones.
don't have to. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's not
I think this
connected
is
in any way.
a fantastic jumping on point. I would definitely rewatch it. I plan to rewatch it as soon as I can.
Yeah.
Knowing that it's coming to Crunchyroll makes me really excited.
Mm-hmm. Steven?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to rewatch this probably when it hits Crunchyroll. Just to, again, when you watch it the first time, right? There's only so much you really get out of it,
Yeah.
and I want to be able to get in there and dig on it.
Yeah.
And now I will say, Ryan, did you do subbed or dubbed?
I did subbed.
Okay, that's what I assumed. So I specifically booked a dubbed.
He fell on the sword.
I gotta take one for we gotta be able to cover all the perspectives.
Yeah.
So
Who
that
did
would be
the-
another.
Were there any big name voice actors or anything?
Actually, going through the list, I struggled to recognize basically anybody. They were all good.
Yeah.
Like again, for a
But
performance
they weren't
difference.
like big name like Billy Crystal.
Because
Yeah,
like Weathering with You had some pretty big, like I think Allison Brie.
Yeah,
and,
they had some
Lee Pace.
recognizable names.
Yeah.
This, like looking at this list, I didn't know who any of these people were until I started looking them up. And there was never a moment where some, random guy number 3 talks. I'm like, oh, that's, Jack Black, like that. None of that happened. So hot right now. But absolutely would recommend. Will rewatch, if nothing else, just to watch it sub, just to get the cover both sides of that coin.
But how was the dub? Was it pretty good?
It was good. Yeah, I mean, it was.
Okay.
Again, it's the second place to Miyazaki.
I have
where-
I have a bandage on my thumb, and every time I try and pick up my phone to check something,
He drops it.
I drop it.
I'm going to give you another bandage if you keep doing that, okay? That's all I'm saying.
But it was not, the level of Miyazaki, right, where you have big names doing the voices.
Right.
But they were all very competent. There was never a moment where I was just like, man, this person sounds terrible or whatever, right? So
Yeah. And I definitely would recommend it. I'm going to go rewatch it pretty much this week in theaters because I just want to see it on a bigger screen.
he just wants to cry again.
I mean, sure, yeah, I'm a glutton for punishment, but
I'm a glutton for punishment. I love this movie.
but yeah, I mean, so whenever Your Name came out, I initially watched it on a plane, and then I finished it, and it was like a 6-hour flight, and I just restarted it.
Oh,
and
wow.
Then on the way back, I watched it again. Like his films just have this kind of rewatchability, I think.
They really do.
That really just makes you want more, because once you can see more detail, once you can get more out of the story that he's telling, and you really get that with this too. And I walked out of the film kind of being like, can I just get back in line? Like, I know there's not another showing.
If I just stay sitting here, will they run it again?
Yeah. Like, so it definitely really had that.
All right, listen. The worm that is our content cannot be contained behind a door, okay? If you go to spoilersintendedpodcast.com, there's no key that'll shut the door on that. This content's going to come out, and it'll give your ears an earthquake of the best kind.
And you don't want to close the door on our Discord, because we have some great channels that you can join in, like what we're listening to, what we're watching, what hobbies we're doing. It's just a good place to hang out.
It's a great place.
Yeah.
And if you want to follow us on social media, there are
Or
two
social
keys.
media, either
there
one.
are 2 keys to that, and that would be Facebook and Instagram. That's like 1 and 2. It's almost like a lock and a key, but I said 2 keys. So 2 keys.
We are just
We're nailing this
hammering
stuff
it
over.
here. You could say we're closing the door.
Not yet. We're almost there. Closing the door on the spoilers, but
Anyways, on social, what can people see if they go there?
well, every week we're posting out there what we're watching. If you want to keep up with the cast, that's a great way to know what's coming up. And yeah, if you want to watch along with us, it's there.
Yeah, awesome.
追いつかないこの身一つじゃ足りない叫び
All right. And here we are. We are back from the spoiler wall. We have opened the door to spoilers. So
Let them all out.
yeah, I mean, I guess if you don't want to hear spoilers, you can close the door now and just get out of here.
But come back later.
But come back later.
Yeah.
It's worth
Go
it.
watch the film. It's really good.
Yeah, it's very good.
Okay, so before we get into any major talks about spectacle and other things like that we talk about every episode, I have some information trivia.
Trivia,
but
if
it's
you
really
will.
like there's really not a lot of trivia for this film.
Okay.
But there is some real life events that kind of match up with some of the places that we
Historical
went.
significance
Yes.
here.
Okay. So Suzume starts her journey in Miyazaki City, which is basically on the east coast of Japan, on the coast, pretty much.
Yeah.
The southernmost island?
Not the southernmost island, but really close to it.
Well,
yeah.
okay.
So in November 19th, 1941, the Hugonada earthquake, 8.0 on the Richter scale, basically leveled 27 homes and 2 people were killed.
What year? What did you say? 41?
1941.
Man, for an 8.0 back then, that's really a low death count.
Well, so I think it was just the location of where it was offshore. There was a minor tsunami, but it wasn't considered a tsunami.
It was so close up.
It was like
time to
3
build.
feet.
Yeah.
So basically, what that did is just wash like a bunch of like ships and stuff out to the shore, like out away from the shore.
Yeah.
So then we move up to Kobe/Ehime, which was January 17th. 1995, the Great Hanshin earthquake, 7.0, but this was basically like directly below Kobe, which is like Osaka, if you're familiar with that, instead of that city. Approximately 6,434 people passed away.
Holy
as a
smokes.
result of this earthquake.
I remember that one.
Yeah, in the film, whenever they go to Kobe, they go to an abandoned theme park.
Yeah.
And basically, I think that's kind of the analog to one of the big theme parks in Osaka that had to be shut down from the Kobe earthquake. So we have that. Then we go up to Tokyo, which is September 1st, 1923, the Great Kanto earthquake, 7.9. This is basically like if you watch like Wind Rises from Miyazaki, this is absolutely like one of the big events that happened in Japan that is kind of like history throughout the whole thing. Extensive firestorms and even a fire whirl added to the death toll. Estimated casualties totaled about 142,000.
Man.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah, and I also found this is crazy, and I've never even heard about this until today while I was reading it, while I was like looking it up. This was also the same day that started the Korean massacre in Japan. Basically, during this period, soldiers of the Imperial Japanese Army, police and vigilantes murdered an estimated 6,000 ethnic Koreans and Japanese socialists for like. And basically, this happened the day of
The same day.
Yeah, the
Crazy.
same
Wow,
day.
That's weird.
Yeah, it was absolutely wild. I would go look it up because I'd literally never heard about it.
What
until
year? What was that again?
1923.
23, okay.
And then we go up to basically the main event of the film, which was March 11th, 2011. All of us are very familiar with the Tohoku earthquake and tsunami. It was a 9.1 on the Richter scale. This is the most powerful earthquake ever recorded in Japan. Earthquake triggered powerful tsunami waves that reached over 133 feet in Miyako, which is basically where Suzume's hometown was.
Right.
Or that's kind of what I'm guessing at here.
Yeah, it seems to be, yeah.
Yeah.
But for people who may not immediately latch on to a lot of those names, Fukushima is one of the big global results and concerns from that, the potential of nuclear meltdown, et
Yeah.
cetera. That's maybe because when you say whatever the earthquake's name is,
The Tohoku.
right? That
Yeah.
may not hit, but Fukushima,
the Fukushima.
is going to hit
Yeah.
basically everybody out there heard of that.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, essentially over 230,000 people were displaced, almost 20,000 deaths. Like, it was a terrible, terrible event.
Yeah.
And that was kind of going into this. And the reason why I read all of that, because it's all really sad, is basically Shinkai had said in multiple interviews that he wanted this film to be a little bit of like coming to terms and a catharsis for the Japanese people to
Yeah.
kind of like come to terms with the loss and kind of moving on past, obviously the Tohoku earthquake and then everything else that's come before it.
Before it.
And
That adds a whole new layer to this that I didn't realize. Like I knew that it was about, all the people that we lost in these places that she was visiting or whatever, but I did not realize the real world connection.
Yeah. Well, and there's that big emphasis on kind of, connect, like when they're doing the prayer before they do the locking of the door, where it's like you listen to the emotions of the people who were there, who should be there, but it's been abandoned, right?
Right.
And like that kind of stuff really hits hard.
It does.
And it's especially, obviously I didn't have all of the historical context. Obviously they bring up like the Tokyo earthquake in the film, but then once we got all the way up to the March 11th tsunami, that one, when it hit, it was like, ooh, wow, that. Ooh,
well, and then like the sequence of like right as they're basically locking both the keystones down, or basically stopping both worms, you see like the flashback of everyone just saying, like,
I'll see you tonight.
Oh man, just brutal. Ooh. And but he also said that outside of the direct comparison to the Tohoku earthquake and everything, he wanted it to be kind of like a remembrance of I guess like not the old way of life, but basically kind of the direction that Japan is going. They have essentially a decreasing population. They there's a lot of like towns and areas inside of towns that are just becoming abandoned because there's just no one there. Yeah, and he wanted that to be basically a remembrance for a lot of these kind of places and just kind of where Japan as a culture is kind of going and moving to.
Right, and where it came from, essentially.
Okay, so sad stuff is over.
All right.
Yeah,
let's pick it up.
Don't worry, we're gonna get back into some sad stuff.
Yeah, no, I know, but like that, it's one of those things where it's like I couldn't talk about this before the spoiler wall because there's a lot of information here that. But I think it's really important that we talk about it.
Well, I'm glad you gave us the context.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about some spectacle.
All right.
I am curious to what you guys say, but I'm going to start.
Yeah, go for it.
What? I normally don't start.
Rude.
So
Taking
this
all the
is
points.
This is Shinkai's first film to be produced in 20.39 aspect ratio, which was really cool because I remember in the theater they actually bring down the curtain to where it's actually like the proper cinematic, cinematic like aspect ratio, which was awesome. Very cinematic feeling to it. And the one thing that really did bother me was a lot of the CGI. I'm very much a traditional hand-drawn guy.
Sure.
And especially going into a Shinkai film because of Weathering with You and Your Name, which basically had no CGI at all.
There was a little bit
of assist in there. But like when you go from like Weathering with You, where they have the clip where it's like the raindrops on a clear umbrella and they lift it up into the sun, that just doesn't really happen here.
And that's kind of the thing is I think that there's some COVID production problems that do kind of go along with this because he didn't start production until 2021. And there's absolutely a level of there's just not enough time or not enough money or whatever. Yeah. Just because like if you're going from, Your Name success and then you have Weathering with You where he could just pour as much money into hand-drawn animation as he could. Right. And then you go from Weathering with You basically being cut off at the head because of COVID, he doesn't have all of these funds to basically really put as much as he wants into his new film. So that's kind of where my mind is going with it. And there was a couple cuts here and there that just didn't do it for me, but the character animation was phenomenal.
Oh yeah, it was great.
Honestly, the action with Sota as the chair was great. that was perfectly acceptable as CGI.
Man, him just like sprinting around as a three-legged chair is amazing.
It was just so funny. Yeah, and that was really good. I thought particularly the sequence at the school, whenever like she's trying to like run up and close the door with him. Oh yeah, because he ran ahead and then he's and then she's basically trying to close it. I thought that whole sequence just was phenomenal because especially once like the little yellow strands start popping up out of the ground to grab the worm and pull it down, like man, it was so good. Yeah.
Steven?
So spectacle wise, my reboot, we'll just get it out of the way. My reboot complaint is the worm over Tokyo. All the extra tendrils that it forms are just like, because the worm has pretty good texture and like kind of like a fiery, flamey inside almost going on. Yeah. And these tentacles were just kind of this like rubbery looking plastic swirlies everywhere. And it was like, boy, this really stands out harshly against everything else that we've gotten so far. And that kind of hurt to see a little bit because it was bad.
See, I didn't think it was bad. Like, I'll just push back a little bit and I'll let you finish your point. But it just like, to me, I saw it and I go, okay, that's not as good as the other stuff. But at no point was I like, oh, eyesore, barf, like I have been with other animated movies that throw CG in there. But
it felt a little too like, TV sci-fi series or reboot-esque in terms of the quality there, especially once put against every other backdrop we've already gotten, right?
Yeah.
So it kind of harms itself where it's been so pretty throughout, then it's just like, whoop,
whenever you see something that isn't like at that level, you're kind of like, ooh. But that's the thing is like this is still looks better than like 95% of the anime films that come out now.
Right.
Unless it's like a Ghibli film or something like that.
Unless there's a lot of budget behind, because this has a lot of push budget power behind it because of the name.
Like, if you're ranking it, and this is still like a solid like 7.88 for the spectacle for it, I think. But
I'd go higher. But
I would probably let it go a little higher than that.
But that's the thing.
This is why we don't do scores anymore.
Yeah, that's why we don't do scores.
Everybody's going to cough on that one, apparently.
Did you have anything else, Steven?
Oh, yeah. So I wanted to point out all of the small details that they really highlight, because this is something, again, bring up kind of the Ghibli comparisons, right? The worlds and places that Ghibli characters live in feel lived in. There are objects that have been forgotten, the socks on the floor, the books are pulled out of, and like especially when you go to like Soto's apartment with all the books and stuff in there.
There's like, so many things slightly out of place. So many things are kind of dirty, but not.
Alive because it's been lived in, right? Which again was kind of the play that Shinkai was going for, where you focus on lived in spaces as opposed to like, because once something's abandoned, right, that it kind of becomes a perfection in that it's no longer being touched. Right, like there's kind of the minimalist whatever where it's like, well, you can't. Well, we do have a couch, but it's not for sitting on. But then there's also the flip side of that, where once it's abandoned, it's also its own untouched, just because no one goes there. And so I think the lived-in spaces he shows, he really wanted to emphasize that they are lived in, and so they put a lot of time and effort into filling out these spaces and making them feel like characters actually live here, and they have lived here, and they will live here. Right?
And like the karaoke bar, there was a lot of little details in that, like when she's doing the dishes and when they're just like singing, like just little stuff I was catching in the background, and
like the character like interactions with that are like what you would think of locals that are that always come to this watering hole every single night, and they just hang out and have fun and those kind of things, where like you just in a lesser film you wouldn't have those little bit of details here and there.
Yeah. So I think that was a very good effort and a good budget well spent, time well spent to emphasize that. And again, also when you go to the ruined places, right, they felt like abandoned ruins. Something happened here. People haven't been here in a while. It's always neat to see people's interpretation. We just, we watched Last of Us not that long ago, right, which has a lot of abandoned places in it. So it's always neat to see different people's interpretation of abandoned spaces and how they look as they fall apart and what they could have been, et cetera. So I think they put a lot of time and effort into those pieces, and it really works well for them.
Yeah.
So let's move on to.
I'd like to speak a little bit about it at some point.
I don't know. Maybe you just you said you didn't like the CGI. We're out of here.
I said I did like the CGI. You're the ones that said you didn't like.
Brian, just agree to agree with us, and we'll move on.
We talked about character animations. I would like to touch on character design.
Yeah.
Because I think the character designs are really good.
They are really good.
They are.
I liked all of the characters, which in every one of his movies, I have enjoyed the designs and the look of each character, because they're very distinct, and to me, the visuals of the character match the personalities perfectly.
Oh, they do.
That's always something that's like, not tricky, but like sometimes you'll have a movie where it's animated and like the character design doesn't quite match the voice they put to it or their mannerisms or something. And these all perfectly match. And not to harp on the CG, I'll just say that, like, again, having watched Weathering with you like 2 weeks ago, I noticed the CG more in that movie, even though there was less of it. Yeah. I think maybe because there was less of it. So it stood out to me, and I disliked it more in that one.
That's fair.
Even though this one had more of it. I guess it was the implementation of it to me felt, okay, cool. Okay, I got it. With Weathering with You, when it happened, to be like, oh, I don't know. But again, maybe it's because it only happens 2 or 3 times that
so it just stands out a little
even
bit
more. Yeah. Okay, let's move on.
Okay, moving on to
I have
performance.
spoken.
So let's move on to the performance.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go ahead and call out our main girl, Suzume, Nanaka Hara. This is her first voice acting role.
Oh, really?
Yes. She's been in movies before. She's 18 years old.
Okay.
And she basically went through basically a casting call of over 1,700 people that Shinkai was looking for. And Shinkai is pretty historically known for picking new talent and not just going with like famous names or whatever. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And he picked her out specifically,
she did fantastic.
Oh, she did phenomenal. Especially towards the end of the film, where you really get to see a lot of the really raw emotions. Yeah. Particularly after she uses him as the keystone and she saves Tokyo, and then she's down in basically at that bottom gate, and she's talking to Daijin. And just like absolutely brutal moment for just the story. And for me, I love cats. And, it's really sad whenever she's so mad at him. Yeah. And then she's like, well, I hate you. And he just withers away. Yeah. And those kind of moments, but like she sells it so well. Yeah. And she did such a good job. Just phenomenal.
Well, a lot of times in these situations, you would have like an older voice actress playing someone younger, right? You'd have like somebody in their 30s who's trying to sound like a high schooler.
But yeah, I mean, she actually is the age, which I think is really big. And she did a really good job, especially being her first like real anime role, and it just happens to be one of the 4th highest grossing Japanese film of all time.
Well, and I would say that so much of the movie rests on her shoulders and her performance. Yeah. Like if you don't get Suzume right and the movie named Suzume, you have an issue, because she isn't like the only character or anything. Everybody else does great too, but she carries so much of the emotional side of stuff. Yeah.
Well, especially because she's essentially acting against a chair, right? And like they're obviously Sota has a decent amount of like emotive response.
I mean, I would say he's the most emotive chair I've seen in most movies. Well, yeah, so I'll give him that. But that being said,
but like just because he's already kind of like a quiet guy and he has this kind of reservation, like, one, because he doesn't want to bring her further into whatever she's already into. But like she definitely carries the emotional weight pretty much the whole film. Yeah. Yeah. What do you guys think?
I'll jump in and I want to talk a little bit about Tamaki, her aunt.
Yeah. She's fun.
I think she's really fun. And I like the performance that I'm not aware of who voiced her.
Eri Fukatsu.
Yeah. She did a really good job of, that like maternal, like found mother type, like instincts and like the caring about her, but trying to still be kind of like the cool aunt to a degree. And then when they're in the road trip with Tomoya and her, that whole dynamic between the three of them and the way she plays a lot of it. And then at the point when she gets like taken over or possessed and she goes into that, and then her emotions after that and the way she acted that part of, I have felt that way, but that's not, how I feel. Like I was like, this is really good.
Well, yeah, because you have this absolutely brutal, truthful moment between both of them of, like the resentment and everything that's happened over the past 12 years, bubble up. And obviously it's augmented because she's essentially possessed by this demigod. Yeah. And once that happens, and then they actually have the reconciliation much quicker than I was expecting in the film. Yeah. It was a good moment for both of them, voice acting wise, because like you really get the absolute raw emotion from that first interaction, and then you go back, a couple more minutes later, and then you actually have the resolution of just, like these people have been living together for 12 years. Like they know how to actually talk with each other.
Well, and you get that range in like 3 scenes.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Well, and you also say like the resolution happens quickly, but within the actual movie there is some time there, a little bit of time for maybe a little simmering, and then her aunt is helping her, and that interaction feels really, really natural. Yeah, and just kind of a like she doesn't really have to justify herself, because be like, hey, I was possessed, right? like that's not the justification I need, but she does still bring it up and talk it through with her.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was gonna
say,
bring
jump
in
in,
some English
Yeah.
language actors here from my perspective. So it's interesting because you talked about that Shinkai likes to work with newer names or like bring in new-ish people. So looking at the list of English language actors that they have,
Vin Diesel.
I recognize nobody. Like there were no name here where I was like, oh, I knew who this person is. Rosalie Chang is Chica. So she is Mei Lin from Turning Red.
Okay.
So, and I will, just looking both at names and also kind of pulling up some of the people who play these various characters, there is also a pretty big emphasis on people who have some Asian either ancestry or like, so Nicole Sakura is Suzume and she is, half Japanese. So it's kind of like, there was definitely an emphasis there on not just bringing in, well, let's just bring in, some white guy.
Yeah.
And although they did bring in some white, like Sota is just Josh Keaton. All right, well, but like, they all have a decent amount of stuff behind them, but there's a lot. Most of the people looking them up, I don't recognize most of what they've done.
Yeah,
if I'm being honest here. So
yeah. One other name I wanted to call out was Suzume's young voice, Akari Miura. She did a great job.
Yeah.
And like that final scene whenever she basically meets her younger self.
Yeah.
And she's just like essentially just rambling on of like, that she knows that her mom's passed away.
Right.
But like she's just trying to rationalize it the best. Yeah, she refuses to accept it.
Yeah.
And just that entire scene just destroyed me.
Really?
Oh yeah, I was out. Like
I could see Andrew just dying in the theater.
all right, well, I want to give you a funny one.
One of the ushers, do you need help, sir?
No. I want to give you a funny one after that. So again, I emphasize, a lot of these people are people I don't recognize.
Yeah.
They're newish. So Rumi's actor is Amanda Miller.
So Rumi is the karaoke bar.
The mother, etc.
And Chica was the girl that she met in Hime.
Yeah,
with the orange
tangerines
girl.
or what was it?
It was just oranges. Mikan.
Yeah. So in terms of minor parts, no big deal, right?
Yeah.
Amanda Miller is the voice of Boruto for Boruto. So 182 episodes of credit. No big, just a minor part.
No big deal.
All right, so let's move on to the score.
Yeah.
Of music.
Well,
The sound
Steven
of music,
starts
the
off.
score of music. The hills are alive. The score of that doesn't work. Doesn't flow at all. So I got to say, the main theme, which if you heard our ad break, you heard part of the main theme, has been stuck in my head for days.
It won't go away.
It's not.
It's an earworm. You get it?
God, my ear earthquake happened.
But I feel like the music did a great job of carrying the weight of the film.
Yeah.
Right. Pre-spoiler, I brought up, it's not quite to the level that Miyazaki has it, but it's like a notch below. It's just a little, there's a little extra oomph that isn't quite there.
And that's, again, no knock on Radwimps because they do a great job.
Yeah.
But
it's just the nature of the music.
You're not Joe Hisashi.
Yeah,
the dude
reality.
has made timeless music over and over and over again.
over again.
He wakes up making timeless music.
Went to
Okay, he
sleep,
goes to
yeah.
sleep making timeless music.
Yeah, and that is absolutely. Because this is still very good. I think this is the best out of the 3 soundtracks.
I'd probably go with that too.
I agree. But I do think to highlight one part of the music is when they're on the actual car ride towards the end, and he's picking the different kind of pop song-esque stuff.
Topical to the moments.
Well, what was the word he? I was like, I'm choosing music that's relevant to my passengers or something like that. Is what he says. But it's very much so kind of. It's not like J-pop exactly, but it's not far from it.
It's city pop.
There we go. That's the. I couldn't come up with the term.
City pop is basically just the moniker given from music from Japan that was really basically Katy Perry of the time, from essentially mid 70s to the late 80s.
Okay.
That's what city pop is.
It's also what Spotify recommends to me on a regular basis.
Oh, I love city pop.
but it was a good break in there because we have kind of a more relaxing moment with the characters.
Yeah.
And we get away from a lot of these big, weighty moments. Just to kind of play something a little light, little fluffy, little refreshing before we get right back into a big, weighty moment.
Because it has that Beach Boys kind of feel to it.
Yeah. Well, it's a very much so, if you were in America, you roll the windows down, you put the top down, everybody goes surf, and, it's the same kind of thing, right?
Well, and it's funny too, because Serizawa is just kind of like, he just happens to be the guy that has the car that isn't a total sleazebag that's going to go take them 7.5 hours up.
But the car
from
is
Tokyo.
also,
also total garbage.
Total junk.
Yeah.
But he's that guy, and he's like, I'm here. I might as well just have some fun and like try and make it as the best experience that I can possibly do.
Well,
best road
I got
trip
a bunch
possible.
of city pops.
See, and I do think, to his credit, right, there is some concern for his friend, right?
Yeah.
His friend missed a major
100%,
milestone in his life. And I did feel, this is more plot related, but I did think maybe there's going to be a little more there where it was like he was also a closer.
Yeah.
Or like had some knowledge of that and like, something really bad. Like I need to actually like facilitate here. But we didn't get that, obviously. But we'll get to that in plot.
He's just a good friend. He's
Oh
just,
yeah, I almost like it the other way. That he's just like a good dude.
Well, like from the other perspective, it's just fun, right? He's just like, I'm just a dude. I'm gonna roll with it. These two women are fighting each other and both climbing into my car. Whatever.
I got nothing else going on. Let's see how this plays out.
Oh, now he's a sleazebag. Anyways,
Oh, that could be taken either way. I meant it like in a very wholesome, let's drive up the country way. I didn't mean like, let's see how this plays out.
Oh yeah, or just light up a cigarette. And, y'all keep fighting, ladies.
the only real notes I have for score for me is I loved the two. There was a little bit of Weathering with You music that was during the news broadcast of whenever they're looking at Daijin's whereabouts or whatever at the beginning of the film. But then the ultimate call out for my favorite Ghibli film, which is Kiki's Delivery Service, they had the music that she basically starts the whole film to on her radio when she's on the broom, and they just played it wholesale.
When do they play it?
The first song that they're playing whenever they're on the road trip.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't catch that. Awesome.
Yeah, and the second it popped on, I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is exactly what I wanted out of this
So
film."
You stand
right
up
now.
crying. I feel seen.
when they did the Weathering with You bit on like the news report or whatever, I was still uncertain what world we were in, and I like did like what they said was like I leaned in and was like staring at the screen like, are you messing with me right now? And the answer is yes, they're messing with me right now. But
no, I was so happy with the Kiki's Delivery Service homage there. And he did mention that, it is one of the films that really inspired him for the story here. So, take that for what it is. What about you, Ryan?
I liked it. I don't have much to add other than what you've already said, other than like, I feel like there were, comparing it to Ghibli films and stuff and saying it's lesser. Ghibli. It is Ghibli, sorry.
Ghibli. It's not giblets.
I learned it as giblets, and it's hard to unlearn that. It definitely feels appropriate for the scenes, though.
Yeah.
I feel like everything matches, everything carries it through, and then like they have the good mixture of like, especially when they're doing like the scene setting of they're just like characters aren't on screen yet. You're just seeing like the area they're going to, and it's like the sound of the wind and the birds, and there's like a car alarm off in the distance or like some random
city
thing, and there's music playing, and like the marriage of all three of the sound effects, the score, and the visuals. Really, I thought was really well done.
Yeah. Well, their musical punctuation and visual punctuation whenever like a big event for the worm is about to happen, and you see it in her eyes.
You see the red,
but then you hear the and and you know exactly what's going to happen.
Oh man, like when the worm is like rearing up, getting ready to actually slam down, and like the music's going, and you have like all the birds take off. They're all like the caws and everything. I was like, man, like this is. And then, like, you accept the idea that, for the people in the street, they're like, that's weird. All the birds are up there. But, like, for her, it's like, it's like the Twilight Zone. The gremlins on the wing!
Yeah. There's something on the wing!
Yeah, I thought that was just really well done. It was just really good. Yeah. All right, so let's move on to plot, which is pretty thick. I mean, like,
yes, like,
okay, well, let's hear it, Steven.
And then he did say, he said, Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Well, no. I mean, I don't really have bad things to say about it. I feel like there's the first few minutes where it kind of takes to ramp up, where you're kind of like, where is this actually going?
Yeah.
And then as soon as Sota is turned into a chair, it just sprints, and it doesn't really stop. Even when they're kind of having
a moment,
a relaxing ride in the car, it's still kind of sprinting.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, I'd never had a moment where I was like, oh gosh, let me check my watch and see how much longer we got here,
Yeah.
But at the same time, there definitely were a couple of moments where I was like, oh man, I want to like be able to put my chair down for a moment or something. Like, holy cow, I'm sweating over here. We're running fast. Like she has the moment when the car breaks down and she's like, how far are we from the destination? And she's like 10 kilometers. I'm like, that's a pretty good run. And he's like 20. She's like, okay, I'll run it. Like, this girl's so athletic. She's been going nonstop. I'm just sitting in a chair sweating because I'm worried about all this.
I will say, I really think the pacing for this film was pretty phenomenal. Like it never lets up to where like you have too much of like a breathing room, and then it does, like the action scenes don't take too long to finish.
Right.
Like it's just enough time for you to really get that emotional climax and then be let back down into like, okay, now we're safe now, right?
Well, I think they do a really good job too of pacing the breadcrumbs of like learning more about what's happening really like efficiently, to where you're never, to me at least, you were never too far in between nuggets of information to kind of like piece together the puzzle, that it got frustrating of like, what are we doing? It always felt like there was
enough information.
Yeah. Just enough to keep you invested and moving along as it went to the next part. Yeah.
I liked how each worm event basically amped up the stakes every single time and the complexity of the encounter, essentially. So the first one, they just got to close the door. Second one, they got to close the door while the cat or Daijin is kind of like harassing them a little bit.
Yeah.
And then the third one is, Tokyo, this is real.
Yeah.
Like, we have to fix this,
You were like, while the cat is harassing them, you mean like while Suzume is being dragged up a defunct Ferris wheel that's been turned back on, so she's hanging in the sky? Like, you're just kind of harassing them a little. Like, she is hanging on the outside of a ferry box that's been defunct for 20 years.
The cat didn't make her walk through the veil into the ever after and almost fall off.
And almost go off the other side.
She did that on her own.
That was a very Paprika moment.
It was.
Of,
well,
like, being brought to the edge.
I really liked that edge to it, because up until that point, it hadn't been really dangerous for her.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you're like, oh, this is really dangerous.
Yeah. Oh, this could break really bad.
Yeah, that was good. And then, you have the kind of silliness of whenever she gets dragged up into the sky that no one else can see this big like red worm thing.
And she just
like zooms up into the sky. And you're like, what?
She just gets yoinked up into the air. That was great.
Yeah.
I think too, like compared to Weathering with You, which also kind of has I guess also Your Name has like the explanation of the magic of what's happening. You have the elder that's like explaining stuff. In this one, I liked it better the way they rolled it out in this. Like I felt like in Weathering with You, it was like a side tangent that kind of slowed things down as they explain what the Rain Maidens were.
Yeah. It definitely hurt the pacing a little bit.
It felt like a detour. This felt like it was all on the same trajectory.
They made it. They pull out their phone and they show you the trip they've taken. That line did not just go off in a little circle and wander around and
right.
It was a straight line straight up Japan.
Yeah.
Like they were always moving forward. I did like, having said that, it did feel like we were just like, go, 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 go. I did like that we got a couple of kind of quieter moments, like on the ferry at night where she's talking to Sota as a chair.
Yeah.
And then also with the children where...
I love that bit.
Well, but like the whole thing here is like we get like...
They're just looking at it in the back seat.
Yeah, okay. That was amazing. We're both, and like the almost spilled the cup and he catches it and they're both just like laser-eyed back. Like, it's like if you had a cat back there to stare at it too, it would have been like the complete circle.
Yeah.
But I was really thinking of when they're at the bar and she's entertaining the kids as like kind of the babysitting role. And
they think it's like an Alexa or whatever.
Right, yeah. Well, that also got me too, where she's like, oh, it's an AI. They're like, what are the stocks? What's the weather? Like, no, it's not that kind of AI. But like him essentially giving the kids like piggyback rides as a chair, I thought was really cute. And again, it's a really kind of fun but emotional moment where you can see why she would fall in love with him.
Yeah.
Right? As opposed to just being, he's your prototypical Japanese hot guy in an anime. I should be in love with him, right? So they let there be more there than just let's watch him walk up the hill in the breeze. Turn your head, man. Yes, let it flow.
Yeah.
You mean Howl from Howl's Moving Castle?
Well, now, you know what? I was actually kind of working my way away from this point, but now I'm going to bring it up.
Here we go.
So when we were like, let's talk about the plot, I went, right? So
You went,
so full circle, right? Because this is a full circle plot where the events are set in motion by herself.
Yes.
By meeting herself in the past. Howl's Moving Castle does the exact same play.
got him.
Oh, it does. Yeah, I know.
Right?
Dead to rights, Andrew.
So this is, again, this is not something new. I do think that moment is a very emotional moment because, again, the person playing the 4-year-old, 5-year-old is selling out for this. And I mean, also our actor for Suzume as well at the time. But like that bit of kind of like, well, I kick off the events that set in motion my own story is, I don't want to call it cliche, but it's a little too much of like a simple, like, let's just time as a circle. Let's put everything together.
Yeah.
Like it hits, but it feels almost a little cheap as a play to make it hit, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
how do you miss?
That.
Well, it's just everything connects. It's just time as a circle. Well, you can't miss at that point, right? Like, and like for Howl's, it also felt maybe a little cheap there. So I kind of do wish that we had found a different way of doing that.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying it's bad because the actual emotions in the scene are just crazy high. But I do wish that maybe they had done that in a different way.
Yeah.
But again, it does put all the agency in our characters. You know, it's not just blind luck that it works.
Yeah.
She has to actually take action. So like, I don't know, it's a mixed bag there for me.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anybody else?
The only real question that I kind of had was, so like with Daijin and Sai Daijin, essentially like they're keystones, and we're just assuming that they're demigods, essentially, or gods, or whatever you want to call them. And, you know, it was one brutal for me just for like, you know, you have this essentially cat that has now been freed from its responsibility for the past, you know, whoever knows how long.
Centuries or whatever, yeah.
And all it wants to do is, you know, be the pet of someone else or just have a good time and that kind of thing.
And kill hundreds of thousands of people.
Well, no, but that's the thing,
they
though.
They make the point that Daijin has been leading them to the places where the problems are occurring.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, where they're going to occur anyways. He's basically...
He's getting them there.
He's getting them there.
Yeah.
And he's trying to, in his own non-communicative way...
Like a cat?
He's basically trying to tell Soda, he's like, you're the keystone now, dude. Like, this is your responsibility, not mine.
Right.
And not because, like, this was destined upon you to be this. It's like... She wants me to be her cat, and you're in the way.
Yeah,
and that's,
she chose me at the start of this by being a tremendous other words, a screw up.
Yeah.
Of just be like, what if I just go into the ruins and just rip a stone out of the ground?
Dude, when you pick a stone up out of the ground and it's frozen and it starts to unthaw,
put it down.
Put it back in the hole.
But with that, you know, it did feel a little unsatisfying at the end whenever Daijin is just kind of like, well, I guess you win, or I give up. I guess I'm not going to be your cat anymore. One, just absolutely just shoot me in the heart now, please.
Right.
But just that kind of resolution felt a little less anticlimactic than what I thought it was going to be.
Well, I think it's also because they didn't explain, even with him saying anything of like, like if they could have like set up something similar to like some of the old Greek tragedies of like, you know, one of the demigods steps out to do his thing and then realize, oh, my role is just to be this. Got it. You know, like I had fun for a while. I get it. This is my purpose. You know,
well, and
they didn't say it. It just happened, and you're like left to like infer that that's what it was. That his actual role.
He just kind of realized he's like, well, I can't be your cat anymore because this is my role.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But they don't say it.
Yeah.
So you're left with that like hanging.
So flip side of that, right? So we had two opportunities to really like land it on you, with one going through the book in the apartment and two with his grandfather.
Yeah.
But the grandfather kind of does do that because which the part that I don't understand is how does Sai Daijin get there? Like, I don't recall him being uprooted at any point.
He just
pops up at
and
one point.
That was my moment of, this is the other key. Wait, why is it here? But he did kind of impart on Sai Daijin, you're like, well, you have all of my knowledge, right? And then when the two cats encounter one another, right, Daijin comes out of the car ready to fight, and Saidaijin is just kind of like, listen, little one, you're going to know your place.
Yeah.
And accept it.
Well, and maybe that's kind of what it was, and we just didn't get that kind of interaction.
It was definitely one of those things where there wasn't, you need like Sota to say something.
Yeah.
There, obviously Sota's not there to say it, but you need someone with knowledge to lay down. He's always being, reminded of his role.
Yeah, like
is.
Saidaijin is basically the father, or the alpha in this
elder,
patriarch.
Yeah, and it's just like, hey, you've had some fun, kid, but we got to go do our thing.
Know your stuff. And like I like too when they have the big fight in the Ever After that Saidaijin felt like with the big whiskers, like the way he transformed, felt very much so kind of like he was the grandpa there.
Yeah.
I really like that. Just to throw in, because we're talking about the cast, just throw extra in.
Yeah, I mean, I really didn't have any big problems with the plot at all.
I think that was probably my biggest one. Was just like kind of the unexplained, like where did Saidaijin come from, and then like why did he just decide, okay, cool, I'll be the Keystone again. What happened to the fourth leg of the chair? Did we ever see that? Did I miss that?
No.
Okay.
I mean, it was just damage. I mean, you would just assume that it was damage from the tsunami or whatever.
I assumed that's what it was, but I had this like creeping feeling when I left. I was like, did I miss like in the background an Easter egg of like the leg falling off or something?
It's kind of too like, a child, right? You give them a toy, and when they love it, like we all know, as we've discovered when we're like, oh, the Star Wars figures were worth so much now. Why did I destroy them? But you were loving them, right?
Yeah, you were a kid. You were using them.
Using them and as they were intended. And I mean, that's kind of just the reality of it. And she even has kind of the moment where she's like, well, I kept it and I knew I took care of it, but there's like a blank there when really it's her older self giving it to her.
Yeah.
So there's some disconnect between there and the whatever intervening amount of time.
So this is just a side story here. So when I was really young, like baby to probably 3 or 4 years old, I had a stuffed bear that was given to me, I think, on my first birthday. And I loved that thing so much, and I bit off its nose so many times that
this is like what, age 13? What are we talking?
Poor Holly.
My mom had basically, I think he had like
Ryan finally got it.
It had to swim over here slowly.
My mom had replaced the nose on Bear. He's just named Bear.
Real creative kid.
I think like 6 or 7 times, like over the course of see, he had
just a revolving door of noses.
Yeah, so he just had different color noses like over the course of my life,
and then unintentionally you'd see that new color nose and be like, well, I gotta bite that one. That looks real.
looks juicy.
That one's more biteable than the last one.
Then like at one point like the section of his nose was gone, so he just turned into a button nose. Yeah. Then one of his eyes fell out. Then all of his fur fell off.
Andrew's over here like full Hannibal Lecter, like gnawing.
What are you doing to this? Poor bear.
I still have him. He's in a Ziploc bag somewhere.
Honest answer. No messing around. When is the last time you bit his nose off? Was it like a year ago? What are we talking?
It would probably be 33 years ago.
Okay,
would be my guess.
That's still too close.
That's a little close for comfort.
All right, let's move into entertainment.
Okay.
So I have a question here.
All right.
And this was probably one of my biggest hang-ups. I actually have hang-ups with this in other media too. Okay, so this is essentially based around real-life events that took real lives.
Yeah, right? To a degree, yeah.
And the inference that this story has kind of given us is that all of the events that led up to like the Tohoku earthquake, the Great Kyushu earthquake, like all these kind of, or Kanto earthquake, excuse me, like it is inferring that there was a possibility that these could have been stopped.
Well, I think I don't know that it's going as far as that. I think what it's doing is it's trying to tell a fantasy story that is rooted, loosely in those events, so that you can cope with like the idea that like this is a fairy tale instead of being like it wasn't like they came out and had like newspapers of like the actual events that happened.
Like I mean, it was implied that it was the Tohoku earthquake and that kind of thing. They never specifically said it outside of just the date. You don't know what year it was or anything like that. But it's just inferred on that. And from my perspective, it felt a little. It just feels weird that
because this is real events.
Because these are real events that happen.
Right.
That. Like it's just implying that if whatever we're watching was real, that that this could have been stopped and someone failed to stop it instead of it just going to happen regardless of whatever someone could do.
Yeah.
Well, but I mean, within a fantasy world, it's acceptable to say that like that. Okay, well, we had an event. I mean, not to connect some make some awkward connections here, but you could like Harry Potter and like Grindelwald. It's like, well, Grindelwald's responsible for the Nazis or something like that, right? Where it's like, okay, it's really weird to connect that to like Hitler and stuff or whatever. But okay, like within your fantasy world, let's make this be the real reason that it happened, whatever. So it's kind of the same play.
Yeah.
And I don't hate it because again, within the rules of the fantasy world, could it have been stopped? But we all know what real world is, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I guess maybe that's just kind of like from my like it just felt weird once I realized that it was centered around real life events. That
to me, it reminded me more of like, now that I know the context, it's more like the original Godzilla film from 54, Gojira, right?
Yeah.
It's like, this is an allegory for, nuclear bombs being dropped on Japan and the aftermath and just how the country's coping with it.
and picks it up and that kind of thing. Yeah.
And so it's more of a like, instead of it being like the presumption is that someone failed and that's the only, it's more of a like, here's a story that involves those things and we can heal together and move forward by like coping with it by this little adventure and an animated film that happens around it. Not that it's like, here's something we can pin our anger on, is it some dude out here didn't lock the door,
Yeah.
Well, and the other flip side to that is, and the movie doesn't give this to us. Yeah, I guess it kind of does because the movie really takes place over just a handful of days.
Yeah.
And so the question here is, one, how often has these disasters been prevented by closers? Like, is this something like Soda's got like, 365 days in the year and he's got 270 saves?
Yeah.
Right? Like, this dude,
which is,
like how are you a grad student trying to pass exams? You are booking it up and down this country.
Also,
kind of
is he waking up at like 2 a.m.? Oh, man.
Yeah, like rolls over and like the window's open, rolls over and is like, oh, I got to get up.
His eyes are red. He's like, no, the music cue, I hear it.
Yeah, but sorry, that was just a question. Because that was like when I like halfway through the film, and I was like, these are like real life events. I was like, I don't know, this feels kind of weird, but I know that it is a fantasy thing, and and that is totally fine for it to be an allegory for trying to have closure and catharsis for this terrible event that did happen that no one could have prevented. There's nothing that we could have done, even if we knew about it. People would have been saved, but at the end of the day, like it's still going to be an earthquake. There's still going to be a tsunami. People are going to be displaced.
I think the answer to your question is just it depends on the person.
Yeah,
honestly, right?
And all right, I'll give you a counterpoint here, right? Because this is something that I've been kind of rolling around in my head for a hot minute. Because I think while it is kind of like there's a little in there of this could have been prevented.
Yeah.
At the same time, I think the way and kind of there's a reverence. There's a a heartfelt connection to it, and I really do think Shinkai kind of came in here to put this out.
It was very sincere,
right? And to put this out in front of ultimately, his nation, his people, of the catharsis of it, and kind of the everyone's saying like their last goodbye because you don't know, right? It's the whole thing about one day you and all your friends went out to play, and it was the last day you were going to play, and you don't know it, right?
Yeah.
So like I think that handling of it because. Gosh, I don't want to do this, but I'm going to do it anyways. If this had been a Hollywood film, right, the trailer for this would be like, fall is in the air, New York City, Julia Roberts and Hugh Grant are falling in love.
Again.
The only problem, it's September 10th. 2001, right?
Oh, wow.
And we'd all just be like, huh, how could you possibly make this film, right? Because this is borderline that level of catastrophe that they're dealing with. But I think, again, the respect that is paid towards that and the reverence almost, because it is a very spiritual movie.
It is.
That is handled around that makes it not hit with the way my horrible example does.
Well, I think too the way they describe the worms is that they're not like malicious.
No,
it's just their nature. They are.
It's just what happens.
Like a natural disaster.
Yeah.
Like so, I think that part for me at least makes it less of a icky thing because it's like it'd be different if the worms were evil and malicious and someone stopped it and so evil won and then it would be like, oh, I don't know, we're taking it too far with the allegory now. But like since it's literally treating them like a natural disaster, I feel like it kind of toes the line for me.
That's fair. Sorry, I keep bringing us down.
No,
I'm not trying to.
This is good discussion to have with this movie.
This movie. In mind.
Like I mean, because there's so much history involved with this film specifically.
Yeah.
That like when I was doing research to for the show, like I'm going through like so many different levels of stuff, and I'm just like, wow. Like, like there's so many coincidences and that kind of thing of like, clearly like this was a concerted effort to try and make this as like a cathartic film as possible for one, the Japanese people and just anyone that's watching it.
Right.
Because it doesn't even like, and I think that's what I like about the film so much was that it doesn't like, just because like I didn't experience the Tohoku earthquake. I watched it happen on live TV.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where it's like, everyone throughout their life has loss or, something that they need to come to terms with at some point.
Yeah.
And this is a good way to kind of like meet that, I think.
Yeah.
Sorry. Entertainment. You guys have fun. Sorry, I'm done.
Entertained. So,
I was entertained.
But again, to connect to that, right? Because it is a really emotional, really heavy stuff here.
Yeah.
What I really liked about the film was we got a lot of comedy dropped in between of just this is kind of your everyday life kind of stuff that could just happen, right? Not that people getting turned into chairs just left and right? Just be careful where you sit.
Watching people react to just the chair just run down the street and like have a chair chasing a cat and a girl chasing the chair is just absolute comedy gold.
Yeah.
Well, that and then also just like when like they get stopped and he's standing upright and then just slowly falls over to one side, dunk, dunk, or as he falls asleep and just dunk.
Yep.
Every time that happened, it got a laugh out of me. I think that kind of stuff was really necessary because again, like
it's a very heavy subject.
Really heavy subject to be dancing around. And like the closer they got to like as they were going north, I was kind of like, where are we going with this? And then like they started getting closer to the date in the journal, and I was like, oh man, I know what this is. Like this is gonna be rough, and it was rough. Like that's some oomph in there. Again we weren't there.
Yeah,
we don't have none of us lost a family member to it or anything like that. It's still like we've grown up in this era. We've all experienced some disaster of some kind. However close or not. So like it still hits, right?
Yeah.
But whew.
Ryan?
I think for me, one of the reasons I liked this movie so much is not even the comedy, it's the genuine, wholesome connections and friendships that are made along this road trip. Always make me smile. Like I'm sitting there in the theater and like when, she's having the moment where what's her character? The girl with the oranges.
Chica,
is like, here, take these clothes. You look better than me anyways. Don't sweat it. And she's like, how can I repay? He's like, don't even sweat. You got to come visit.
Come back and visit.
And then seeing her visit her again
on the way back.
in the credits, I was like, oh, that made me smile so hard because I'm a sucker for those types of road trip movies where it's like, like they didn't fall into a situation where like she met a scumbag along the way or somebody that tried to scam her. It was every interaction she had was this tiny little found family. And again, we revisited it at the end, which with her aunt, and you see her aunt back there talking and interacting with all these people. I loved all that. For me, that was what made the movie go over the top for me, was the interactions being just so wholesome and so like just the genuine friendships that like were built along the way.
So I will say that really, again, pays off, right? Full circle kind of stuff here.
Yeah.
Because my wife is so mad about Your Name because the way it ends isn't like the full, bow on top completion.
I like that though.
I do too.
See, that has its proper place too, and it's very typical with a lot of Japanese storytelling,
particularly Shinkai.
But other places, I mean, like Porco Rosso, same drill. It's just it's never said out loud, right? Whereas this one, like they did the full circle, full wholesomeness, where everything comes back to they did the road trip one way, they do the road trip the other way. She gets to introduce her aunt to these people, especially with it kind of being mixed in with the credits. It just felt like these really fun vignettes where we didn't have to
have like a full scene.
Like, we don't have to have dialogue. We don't have to describe what the plot is.
Because you know what it is. Yeah, you know what they're saying. You know what they're like. You know that they're just genuinely happy to see each other and just to spend time together.
Yeah. Well, and also from maybe a more American sentiment, I don't know. This is always the weird part about going to Japan in terms of ages of people in relationships, because she's like 17.
Yeah.
And he's like finishing grad school. So he's,
23.
23.
Oh, I thought he was
Yeah.
like in the middle of college. I didn't think he was that old.
He was taking
could've been
exams to
wrong.
become a teacher at the end of his grad school.
So that's grad school,
That's,
okay.
that's
Yeah.
Like I know in the dub version that was spelled out exactly that way. So again, the translation, it may have been that he was finishing college, and that's a little bit of a tightening of a gap.
Yeah.
But it's a little. That's a little. And it's like this is like
Yeah.
the first boy she's ever seen, basically, and now she.
That's not
in her
true.
entire life.
This is like the Little Mermaid. Like
She left the
I'm
monastery.
gonna leave all of my life behind because I love him. Like you're 16, get back in place.
Well,
you know?
she's 17.
She's 17,
Yeah.
but still saying. But I think
Get it straight.
again with the way they handled the ending of the movie, where he still has business to attend
Yeah.
to. She very obviously from the end credit scene, she goes back with her life. She's probably studying to become a nurse.
Yeah.
Based on what her mother had done
Yeah.
and the books and stuff. And so then some amount of time passes before she reconnects with him.
Yeah.
And I think that for at least from my own perspective, that was good for not feeling as about it.
Yeah.
Because you can kind of have, scenarios, right, where two people are thrust into really stressful situations together, and then a bond forms there just because of the situations.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be there otherwise. So letting them come back to reunite together after there's been a little time has passed,
yeah.
and stuff, it felt better.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah, it would have been weird if they just like made out right on the train station before he left.
Yeah,
That's the one thing that I really do like about.
French kiss, French kiss.
Quick, close the door. Your aunt doesn't need to see this. Like,
He lights a cigarette.
The other thing too is
Andrew's like, I'm going to steamroll right past this.
It never happened. Blah, 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 blah.
Whenever you have, I guess, like the secondary character like Serizawa, who's Soto's friend, I always worry whenever those kind of characters show up that they're not going to be genuine.
Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
I was so happy that I was not. I wasn't correct.
Right.
Yeah.
The scene where like after the aunt is forced to confront Suzume, and she breaks down, she runs into the rest stop, and he's there just like having the best day of his life, got a cup of ice cream.
Yeah.
And she runs up bawling. He's just like, oh man, I don't know what to do about this. And then the ice cream falls off and hits the floor. And it's like, if you're like 5, this is the worst day ever. He's like 23 or 24. He's just like, oh, this is so bad. Like, well, I just because again, if he's the slick, smooth sleazebag, oh baby, tell me what's wrong.
Yeah.
Right? He just that's
Yeah,
not that character.
he's not that kind of guy, and like that's what I liked about it.
Also, I do want to shout out because I forgot about the awesome scene where they're both trying to get into his car, and the people are like, he must be two-timing. And like, the people like talking about like what they think is happening, and the same thing with the ice cream cone. And
Yep.
they see her crying, and they're like, what did he say to her? And they're just like judging and looking at him, and he's like being totally supportive. It's like, yeah.
Well, and we're kind of ramping down here, but I loved the scene of the car, like you have the payoff of basically like the top
convertible.
doesn't work, and then it's raining. They're like, what are you gonna do? And then
he's so casual about it too, because he's earlier in the bit he's kind of concerned about his seats, and then he's just like, yeah, the top doesn't work. What you gonna do about it? We'll keep driving.
Yeah.
and then you have the full circle callback of them crashing into the ditch, and
Yeah.
then it's like, well, it's fixed now, and then the door falls off.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just fantastic comedic
Yeah,
timing.
that was good stuff.
Kill
Yeah.
me.
All right, so that does sound like we are pretty much out of time. But before we go, we have to talk about our Patreon, because what would be an episode of Spoilers Intended without a shameless shill for $1?
It's not shameless.
It's
There's
pretty
shame
It's
here.
pretty shameless.
There's a lot of shame. No, there's no shame at all. Give us your money. We love it.
yeah.
We spend it on podcast stuff.
So
pays hosting fees, keeps the lights
Yeah.
on. Lets us go in some ways be able to go to the movies like this over and over and over again.
Yes.
but what does $1 get you? And $1 gets you access to all of our bonus episodes.
Yes.
One guaranteed per month.
Yep.
But you get our whole library that's
The whole
already come
back
before it.
catalog.
Yep.
Yeah.
We have some awesome episodes that I'm not going to tell you about. My 2 co-hosts are.
Wow, just lay it on us. Well, I'm going to talk about the time that we went through and we bought far too many sodas. Again, your Patreon dollars support this kind of behavior. And went through and did a tier list, taste testing every single one, and made ourselves sick.
Yes, we used your money for reckless gastrointestinal behavior, and it was we all paid for it. I'll shout out the Intro to Gundam episode. If you've ever thought about like, hey, what are these wacky robots all about? How do I get into Gundam?
How many war crimes can happen within an episode?
Yeah.
A lot.
I have an interest in child soldiers and mecha. Where should I start? Well, buddy, we got a whole episode for you. Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff. And again, to reiterate, in case you can't tell, these episodes aren't like our normal review episodes.
Yep.
We do tier lists, we do rankings, we do just random stuff like Intro to Gundam.
We pulled up a bunch of portraits of presidents and then decided whether or not we thought we could win in a fight with them, right?
Yeah.
Like,
now, if for whatever reason you don't want to support us with $1, that is totally okay.
It's fine.
We would love for you to share us, review us, tell us about, tell your friend.
Yeah, if you're on Spotify, follow our podcast.
Yep.
If you're on, Apple Podcasts, leave us a review. If you're anywhere where you can leave a review, leave us a review. If you just want to tell a friend about it, please do that. It helps us a whole lot.
Share our posts, like them,
if you
follow us on
See
Facebook.
us posting on Facebook, leave a comment, Sometimes, we put something out there and we say, hey, we think this was great. And you don't think that? Let us know, man. Get in there. Let's have a conversation.
Yep. All right. So that does sound like all the time we have this week. So until next time, I'm Andrew.
I'm Ryan.
And I'm Steven.
And every spoiler was intended.